Made to Stick: Why Some Ideas Survive and Others Die, by Chip Heath and Dan Heath. Picture this. A friend of a friend, we'll call him Dave, is wrapping up a business trip in Atlantic City. With some time before his flight, he settles into a hotel bar for a quiet drink. Just as he's finishing, an attractive woman approaches and offers to buy him another round. Dave's surprised but flattered. "Sure," he says. She returns from the bar with 2 drinks. He thanks her, takes a sip, and everything goes black. When Dave comes to, he's disoriented and freezing. He's lying in a bathtub filled with ice. Panic sets in as he tries to piece together where he is and how he got there. Then he spots a small note on the table beside the tub. 2 sentences, neatly written. "Don't move. Call 911. There's a cell phone next to the note. With numb, clumsy fingers, he dials. The operator answers with an eerie calm, as if she's heard this before. "Sir, I need you to reach behind you, slowly and carefully. Tell me, is there a tube coming out of your lower back?" Terrified, he feels behind him. There is. The operator continues, her voice steady. "Sir, don't panic, but one of your kidneys has been harvested. There's a ring of organ thieves operating in this city, and they got to you. Paramedics are on their way. Just don't move." Now, you've probably heard some version of that story before. It's one of the most successful urban legends of the past few decades. It's a story that sticks. You understand it, you remember it, and you could probably retell it almost perfectly an hour from now. But here's the million-dollar question. Why? Why does a completely false story about stolen kidneys travel the world with no marketing budget, no advertising campaign, no corporate backing, while brilliant, life-changing ideas we encounter at work, school, or in our communities often die the moment they leave our lips? This is the puzzle that brothers Chip and Dan Heath set out to solve in their groundbreaking book, Made to Stick. Chip, a professor at Stanford's Graduate School of Business, and Dan, a textbook publisher and educational innovator, spent years studying this question from different angles. They examined everything from urban legends and conspiracy theories to viral advertising campaigns and unforgettable classroom lessons. And what they discovered is revolutionary. Sticky ideas aren't born, they're made. They found patterns, a set of 6 simple principles that all remarkably memorable ideas share. And here's the beautiful part. Anyone can learn to use them. Today, I'm going to share those 6 principles with you. This isn't just about telling better stories. This is about learning the architecture of influence. By the end of our time together, you'll have a framework, a secret recipe for crafting messages that people will not only remember but will actually care about and act upon. This is the science of making ideas stick. Before we dive into the 6 principles, we need to meet the villain of our story. There's one great enemy standing between you and a sticky idea, and the Heath brothers call it the curse of knowledge. It sounds dramatic, but it's a simple, profound truth. Once we know something, it becomes almost impossible to imagine what it was like not to know it. Our knowledge has cursed us. We become so fluent in our own expertise that we forget other people don't have the same context, the same background, the same mental framework we do. There's a fascinating study from Stanford in 1990 by a psychology student named Elizabeth Newton. She created a simple game with 2 roles: tappers and listeners. The tappers got a list of 25 well-known songs like Happy Birthday or The Star-Spangled Banner. Their job? Pick a song and tap out the rhythm on a table. The listener's job? Guess the song. Sounds simple enough. But the results were stunning. Out of 120 songs tapped out, listeners guessed correctly only 3 times. That's a 2.5% success rate. But here's the kicker. Before the listeners guessed, Newton asked the tappers to predict how often they'd get it right. The tappers predicted 50% success. Think about that gap. The tappers thought they were communicating successfully 1 out of every 2 times, but in reality they only got through 1 time in 40. Why? Because when the tapper is tapping, they're hearing the full melody in their head. The trumpets, the violins, the lyrics, it's all there. The song feels completely obvious. But the listener isn't hearing a melody. All they hear is a series of disconnected taps, like bizarre Morse code. The tapper has knowledge the listener doesn't, and they can't imagine what it's like to not have that knowledge. This is the curse of knowledge, and it happens every single day. The CEO, talking about unlocking shareholder value, is hearing a symphony of strategy in her head, but her employees on the front lines just hear disconnected taps. The teacher explaining mitosis for the 100th time can't remember what it was like hearing that word for the very first time. The curse of knowledge makes our communication abstract, full of jargon, and ultimately forgettable. It's the villain that ensures our ideas die a quiet death. So how do we defeat it? The Heath brothers offer us a battle plan, a checklist of 6 principles that act as a secret code for creating sticky ideas. They even created a handy acronym, SUCCES. Simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional, and stories. Let's break them down, one by one. The first principle is simplicity. Now, when you hear simple, you might think of dumbing down or sound bites. But that's not what this is about. Simplicity is about finding the absolute core of your idea. It's about stripping away everything that isn't essential until all that's left is the most important, most critical truth. The French aviator and author Antoine de Saint-Exupéry once said, "A designer knows he has achieved perfection not when there is nothing left to add, but when there is nothing left to take away." That's the essence of simplicity. Think about the U.S. Army. A battlefield is one of the most chaotic, unpredictable environments on Earth. Plans are made, orders are given, but as the old saying goes, no plan survives contact with the enemy. For years, the Army struggled with this. They'd create incredibly detailed move-by-move plans, but these plans would become useless 10 minutes into battle. So in the 1980s, they adapted. They invented a concept called commander's intent. At the top of every military order, there's now a crisp, plain-talk statement that specifies the goal of the plan, the desired end state of the operation. It's not a list of instructions. It's a destination. For a general, it might be something like, break the will of the enemy in the southeast region. For a captain on the ground, it could be, my intent is to take Hill 4305 to protect the flank of the 3rd Brigade. The commander's intent gives every soldier the freedom to improvise, to adapt to the changing chaos of the battlefield, while still being perfectly aligned with the overall mission. They may lose the plan, but they never lose the intent. This is what a simple, core message does. It provides a guiding star that helps people make decisions in complex situations. Perhaps the greatest business example is Southwest Airlines. For decades, the airline industry has been a financial black hole, but Southwest has been consistently profitable for over 30 years. How? Their founder, Herb Kelleher, once explained his secret. He said, I can teach you the secret to running this airline in 30 seconds. This is it. We are the low-fare airline. He continued with an example. Imagine Tracy from marketing comes into your office. She says her surveys show that passengers on the Houston to Las Vegas flight would really enjoy a light chicken Caesar salad instead of just peanuts. What do you say? The answer is simple. You say, Tracy, will adding that chicken salad make us the low-fare airline from Houston to Las Vegas? Because if it doesn't help us become the unchallenged low-fare airline, we're not serving any chicken salad. The low-fare airline is the commander's intent for every single employee at Southwest. It's a simple idea, but it's so profound that it has guided thousands of decisions, big and small, for decades. It's simple, but it's not dumbed down. It's elegant. It's the core. Finding this core means you have to be a master of exclusion. It means weeding out ideas that are important, but just aren't the most important. James Carville, the political strategist for Bill Clinton's 1992 presidential campaign, famously said, "If you say three things, you don't say anything." He forced the campaign to focus on one core message, a message that's stuck in the minds of millions. It's the economy, stupid. Simplicity, then, is about finding that one single core idea, but it's also about making it compact. The ultimate models of simple and profound messages are proverbs. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. It's short, it's memorable, and it contains a deep well of wisdom drawn from long experience. That's what we're aiming for. So that's the first principle. Simple. Find the core and make it compact. But a simple idea isn't enough if no one's paying attention. This brings us to the second principle, unexpectedness. The second principle, unexpected. The first problem of communication is getting someone's attention. The most basic way to do that is to break a pattern. Our brains are incredibly efficient at tuning out the familiar, the hum of an air conditioner, the feeling of our clothes, the sound of a boring flight safety announcement. We've all been there. You're on a plane, and the flight attendant starts the pre-flight safety spiel. Nobody listens. We've heard it 100 times. But one Southwest Airlines flight attendant named Karen Wood decided to break the pattern. Her announcement went something like this. If I could have your attention for a few moments, if you haven't been in an automobile since 1965, the proper way to fasten your seatbelt is to slide the flat end into the buckle. To unfasten, just lift up on the buckle and it will release. She continued, and as the song goes, there might be 50 ways to leave your lover, but there are only 6 ways to leave this aircraft. 2 forward doors, 2 overwing exits, and 2 aft doors. The location of each exit is clearly marked with signs overhead, as well as red and white disco lights along the floor of the aisle. She even got them to look. At the end of her announcement, the passengers broke out in applause. She didn't just get their attention, she earned it. She broke their guessing machines, their internal scripts, for how a flight attendant is supposed to act. Surprise is a powerful tool for getting attention. But surprise doesn't last. To hold attention, you need to generate interest and curiosity. And the best way to do that is by opening up a gap in someone's knowledge. This is what the Heath brothers call the gap theory of curiosity. It's based on the work of economist George Lowenstein, who argued that curiosity happens when we feel a gap in our knowledge. That gap feels like an itch we need to scratch, a puzzle we need to solve. We sit through bad movies just to find out how they end, because the pain of not knowing is worse than the pain of watching. Great communicators open these gaps before they close them. They don't just give you the facts. They first make you realize you need the facts. Think about a classic news teaser. There's an invisible chemical in your home, and it may be killing you right now, the story at 11. Suddenly you feel a gap. You didn't even care about invisible chemicals a second ago, but now you have to know. This is the technique that Nora Ephron, the famous screenwriter, learned on her very first day of journalism class. Her teacher gave the class a set of facts. Kenneth L. Peters, the principal of Beverly Hills High School, announced today that the entire faculty will travel to Sacramento next Thursday for a colloquium in new teaching methods. Speakers will include anthropologist Margaret Mead, college president Dr. Robert Maynard Hutchins, and California Governor Edmund Pat Brown. The students dutifully typed up their leads, rearranging the facts. Governor Pat Brown, Margaret Mead, and so on. The teacher collected their papers, scanned them, and then said, "The lead to the story is, there will be no school next Thursday." In that instant, Efron says, she understood what journalism was really about. It wasn't just regurgitating facts. It was about figuring out the point. It was about understanding what it meant and why it mattered. Her teacher had broken her schema of journalism and, in doing so, created an idea that stuck with her for the rest of her life. So to be unexpected, you have to break a pattern, violate expectations, and then, to hold that attention, you open a knowledge gap and fill it. This brings us to our third principle, concreteness. The third principle, concrete. Our brains aren't wired to remember abstract information. We're wired to remember things we can see, feel, hear, and touch. Language is often abstract, but life is not. Aesop didn't write a philosophical treatise on cognitive dissonance. He told a story about a fox who couldn't reach a juicy bunch of grapes and decided they were probably sour anyway. Sour grapes. The concrete image is what has allowed that lesson to survive for over 500 years. If he had just said, "Don't be bitter when you fail," the idea would have been long forgotten. So much of modern communication, especially in business and academia, is lost in a fog of abstraction. Mission statements, synergies, strategies, visions, they're often so ambiguous they're meaningless. Concreteness is the enemy of this kind of talk. To be concrete means to explain your ideas in terms of human actions, in terms of sensory information. In the simple chapter, we talked about schemas, the pre-existing concepts in our mind. If I ask you to imagine a pomelo, you might struggle. But if I tell you a pomelo is like a giant grapefruit with a very thick, soft rind, you can picture it instantly. I've used a concrete schema you already have, a grapefruit, to build a new idea. The Heath brothers call this the Velcro theory of memory. Our brain is like a sheet of Velcro covered with thousands of tiny loops. A new idea is like a ball with hooks on it. The more hooks an idea has, the better it will cling to our memory. Abstract ideas have no hooks. Concrete ideas are covered in them. In 1968, the day after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, a third-grade teacher in the all-white town of Riceville, Iowa, named Jane Elliott, wanted to teach her students about prejudice in a way they would never forget. Talking about it abstractly wasn't working, so she made it concrete. She divided her class into two groups, the brown-eyed kids and the blue-eyed kids. On the first day, she announced that the brown-eyed kids were superior. They were smarter, better people. They got extra recess time. The blue-eyed kids, she said, were inferior. They had to sit at the back of the room and wear special collars so everyone would know their status. Elliot was shocked at how quickly the lesson took hold. Friendships dissolved instantly. The brown-eyed kids became nasty and vicious, taunting their former friends. The blue-eyed kids became sad, timid, and their academic performance plummeted. The next day, she reversed the exercise. She announced she'd been wrong. It was actually the blue-eyed kids who were superior. Immediately, the blue-eyed kids, once dejected, became gleeful and arrogant, while the brown-eyed kids felt the sting of discrimination. That experience, that brutal, concrete simulation, put so many hooks into the idea of prejudice that 20 years later her students still remembered it vividly. They didn't just learn about prejudice, they felt it. That's the power of concreteness. This also explains why stories are so powerful. They're inherently concrete. A story about a specific person doing a specific thing is always more memorable than an abstract principle. Which leads us to the fourth principle, credibility. The fourth principle, credible. For an idea to stick, people have to believe it. In our modern world, we're constantly bombarded with messages, and we've developed a healthy skepticism. So how do we make our ideas credible? The most obvious way is to use an authority. If a Nobel Prize-winning scientist tells you something about physics, you're likely to believe it. But most of us don't have a Nobel laureate on speed dial. So the Heath brothers point out a more surprising source of credibility, the anti-authority. Think about anti-smoking ads. For years they featured stern warnings from the Surgeon General or celebrity endorsements. But one of the most effective campaigns ever featured a woman named Pam Laffin. Pam wasn't a doctor or a celebrity. She was a 29-year-old mother of two who had started smoking at age 10. By age 24, she had emphysema. The ads were brutal. They showed her struggling to breathe, showing the surgical scars on her back, talking about how smoking left her with a fat face and a hump on my neck. She said, "I started smoking to look older, and I'm sorry to say it worked." Pam Laffin had a credibility that no doctor could ever match. She was living proof of the consequences. Her honesty and her tragic experience made her a powerful anti-authority. But what if you don't have an external source of credibility, either an authority or an anti-authority? Then your idea has to have internal credibility. It has to vouch for itself. One of the best ways to do this is with vivid, concrete details. A person's knowledge of details is often a good proxy for their expertise. In a simulated trial, researchers found that jurors were more swayed by arguments that contained small, irrelevant but vivid details, like a child brushing his teeth with a Star Wars toothbrush that looks like Darth Vader. The detail made the story seem more real, and therefore more believable. Another source of internal credibility is statistics. But statistics are usually boring and forgettable. The key is to use them to illustrate a relationship, not just as raw numbers. You have to put them on a human scale. During the Cold War, an anti-nuclear group called Beyond War wanted to communicate the terrifying scale of the world's nuclear arsenal. Just saying, there are 5,000 nuclear warheads, is abstract. It doesn't mean much. So in their presentations, they would take a single metal B and drop it into an empty metal bucket. It would make a loud clatter. They'd say, "This is the Hiroshima bomb." Then they'd describe the devastation. Next, they'd drop 10 BBs into the bucket. "This is the firepower of one nuclear submarine." The sound was louder, more chaotic. Finally, they would say, "This is the world's current arsenal of nuclear weapons." And they would pour 5,000 BBs into the bucket. The roar was deafening, terrifying. It went on, and afterward there was dead silence. No one remembered the number 5,000, but everyone remembered the relationship, the terrifying escalation from one bomb to a world-ending arsenal. They made the statistic credible by making it concrete and emotional. A final, powerful source of credibility is something the Heath brothers call the Sinatra test. It comes from the song New York, New York, where Frank Sinatra sings, "If I can make it there, I'll make it anywhere." An example passes the Sinatra test when one example alone is enough to establish credibility for your entire claim. If you've catered a White House state dinner, you can cater any event. If your security company has the contract for Fort Knox, you don't need any other clients on your resume. A shipping company in India, called Safe Express, wanted to win the contract to distribute Bollywood films, a mission-critical job where security is everything. The studio was skeptical, so the Safe Express representative told them two stories. First, that they had handled the nationwide release of the fifth Harry Potter book, a logistical feat requiring perfect timing and zero leaks. And second, that they were also the company trusted to deliver all the high school board examination papers across the country. Harry Potter and the national exams. If they could make it there, they could make it anywhere. The studio signed the deal. That's credibility. But belief isn't enough. For people to act, they have to care. And that brings us to the fifth principle, emotional. The fifth principle, emotional. Mother Teresa once said, "If I look at the mass, I will never act. If I look at the one, I will." Researchers at Carnegie Mellon University tested this. They gave people $5 and the opportunity to donate to save the children. One group received a letter filled with statistics about the massive scale of starvation in Africa. Food shortages in Malawi are affecting more than 3 million children. The second group received a letter about a single 7-year-old girl from Mali named Rokia. Rokia is desperately poor and faces the threat of severe hunger or even starvation. Your financial gift will change her life for the better. The results? The group that read the statistics donated an average of $1.14. The group that read about Rokia donated $2.38, more than twice as much. The researchers then tried a third version, giving a group both the statistics and the story of Rokia. You might think that would be the most powerful combination. It wasn't. That group donated only $1.43. The statistics actually made people less generous. Why? The researchers theorized that thinking about statistics puts us into a more analytical frame of mind. When we put on our analytical hat, we turn off our emotional hat. We hinder our ability to feel. To make people care, you need to make them feel something. The most basic way to do this is to form an association between something they don't yet care about and something they already do. But the real magic happens when you appeal not just to their self-interest, but to their identity. Think about the famous "Don't Mess with Texas" anti-littering campaign. For years, Texas had a huge litter problem. The typical litterer was an 18 to 35-year-old male who drove a pickup truck, liked sports, and didn't respond well to authority. Telling him, "Please don't litter," or showing him a picture of a crying Native American wasn't going to work. So the campaign tapped into something he already cared about deeply, his identity as a Texan. The ads featured tough, iconic Texans, like football players Ed Too Tall Jones and Randy White, or country singer Willie Nelson. The message wasn't, "Littering is wrong." The message was, "Real Texans don't litter." It was an appeal to identity, to group pride. And it worked. Within 1 year, litter had declined by 29%. Within 5 years, it was down 72%. They didn't make Bubba care about the environment. They made him care about what it means to be a Texan. So to make your idea emotional, connect with an individual, not a statistic. Associate your idea with something people already care about. And appeal not just to what they have to gain, but to who they are. This leads us to our final and perhaps most powerful principle, stories. The sixth principle, stories. A story is more than just entertainment. A story is a simulation. The Heath brothers argue that stories are like flight simulators for the brain. When we hear a story, our minds aren't passive. Research shows that when we hear a story, we simulate it. Brain scans reveal that when we listen to a story about someone running, the motor cortex in our brain lights up in the same areas as if we were running ourselves. Hearing stories prepares us to act. Gary Klein, a psychologist who studies how people make decisions in high-pressure environments like fire stations and intensive care units, has found that stories are the primary way experts share their wisdom. He tells the story of a nurse in a neonatal ICU who was watching a baby whose color was fluctuating. Suddenly, the baby turned a deep blue-black. The medical team rushed in, assuming the baby's lung had collapsed, a common problem. They prepared to insert a chest tube. But the nurse felt something was wrong. "It's the heart!" she yelled. The team pointed to the heart monitor, which showed a steady, normal heartbeat. But she was insistent. She put her stethoscope to the baby's chest. Silence. The heart wasn't beating. She realized the monitor was only measuring the heart's electrical activity, not its mechanical pumping. The heart was being strangled by air trapped around it. She diagnosed the problem, and the baby's life was saved. That story is a flight simulator. For any nurse who hears it, it provides two critical things: simulation, knowledge about how to act when a heart monitor might be misleading, and inspiration, the motivation to trust your gut and speak up, even against authority. Stories get people to act, and the best part is, we don't have to be brilliant storytellers to use them. Life generates amazing stories for us every day. Our job is to learn how to spot them. The Heath brothers identify 3 basic inspiring story plots. 1. The challenge plot. This is the classic David and Goliath story. A protagonist overcomes a huge obstacle. Think of Jared, the college student who lost 425 pounds by eating Subway sandwiches. These stories inspire us to work harder and take on new challenges. 2. The connection plot. This is a story about people who bridge a gap, racial, social, or otherwise. The story of the Good Samaritan is a classic connection plot. These stories inspire us to be more tolerant, to help others, and to work together. 3. The creativity plot. This is the MacGyver plot. It involves someone making a mental breakthrough or solving a problem in an innovative way. Think of the apple falling on Newton's head. These stories inspire us to think differently and experiment. When we learn to spot these plots in our daily lives, the challenge, the connection, the creativity, we build an arsenal of powerful stories that can move people to act. So there you have it, the 6 principles of sticky ideas: simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional stories. Success. It's a framework, a checklist that allows us to systematically defeat the curse of knowledge and craft messages that are understandable, memorable, and effective in changing thought or behavior. From John F. Kennedy's simple, concrete, and unexpected call to put a man on the moon, to the manager of an army mess hall in Iraq who decided he was in charge of morale, not just food, we see these principles at work everywhere. These aren't tricks. They're deep truths about how our minds work, about what grabs our attention, what earns our trust, what touches our hearts, and what moves us to action. They're the tools that allow our most important ideas not just to be heard, but to survive, to spread, and to make a difference in the world. When you step back and look at the landscape of ideas presented and made to stick, you realize that Chip and Dan Heath have done something truly remarkable. They've given us a language for something we all intuitively feel but struggle to explain: why some ideas feel alive and others feel dead on arrival. The most powerful lesson in this book, for me, isn't any single principle, but the meta-idea that underpins all of them. Communication isn't a soft skill. It's the fundamental skill. The ability to get an idea out of your head and into someone else's, intact and influential, is a superpower. In a world drowning in information, clarity and memorability are the scarcest resources. We're constantly competing for attention. Whether we're a teacher trying to explain algebra, an entrepreneur pitching an idea, or just a person trying to convince friends to see a movie, what the Success Framework provides is a systematic way to rise above the noise. It's a diagnostic tool. When an idea isn't working, you can hold it up against the 6 principles and see where it falls short. Is it too abstract? Is it not credible? Is it failing to make anyone care? The beauty of this framework is its practicality. It's not a high-minded theory reserved for marketing gurus or professional speakers. It's a checklist you can use for your next email, your next presentation, or your next conversation. If you were to take just a few actions after hearing this summary, I'd suggest these 3. First, the next time you have an important idea to share, force yourself to find its single most important core. Strip away all the nice-to-knows and focus on the need-to-know. Can you express it in a single sentence? A proverb? That's your commander's intent. Second, find one surprising fact or a single concrete image that breaks a pattern. Instead of starting with, "Here are the 5 points I want to make," start with a mystery, a question, or a story that makes your audience lean in and ask, "What happens next?" And third, translate one abstract concept into something concrete. Instead of talking about efficiency, tell a story about a specific employee who saved a specific amount of time. Instead of innovation, show them the metaphorical block of wood that defined the Palm Pilot. Ground your ideas in the real sensory world. That was a summary of Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. We've explored the main highways of their work today, but the real treasure is in the details of the journey. A summary can give you the map, but it can't replicate the experience of walking the path yourself. The book is filled with dozens more stories, studies, and insights that bring these principles to life in ways that are, well, incredibly sticky. If you've ever felt the frustration of having a great idea that no one seemed to understand or care about, then this book isn't just a guide, it's a revelation. It's a manual for being heard. The link to get your own copy is in the description below. Also, if this journey through the world of sticky ideas brought you some value today, please take a moment to click that subscribe button. We have so many more incredible books on the billionaire's bookshelf to explore together, and I wouldn't want you to miss our next adventure. Let's keep learning and keep growing together.